There you go.
All right, for those of you in the room virtually or in person,
And I got to see about that because
if you were saving seeds this year, which it doesn't matter if you are or not, but if you were saving seeds, what point do you think you would be at right now? Where would you be at with your seed saving right around the time of the frost and the snow? Any ideas?
I would hope you'd be done.
That's Miss Marcy, right? You said hypothetically you'd be done.
I mean, you may be storing them, but I mean, basically you've gathered everything you need to gather because the plant should be done.
Mm-hmm. Yes, if you have chosen varieties that will finish within your growing season, then with your seed saving, the plants themselves would be done. Your work would just be starting on one level, because once you collect seeds from your garden, then it's time to process them and store them properly. And that's kind of what tonight's session is about. Our session in the spring was about some of the practical parts of seed saving, like how do I plant my garden? How do I decide what seeds to save? Are there any, there are special things that you can do in the beginning of the season that make it so your plants and your seeds kind of come through as you expect them to. And we're more than happy to take questions about that stuff too. But our main focus in terms of what we're going to demonstrate tonight is more on how do I get my seeds out of the garden? How do I store them? And we're going to do this in a species by species way, a vegetable by vegetable way, if you will. But before we get started with that, I want to point out that humans have a really special relationship with seeds, and seeds have a really special relationship with us. Because if you think about it, we have legs and we carry them. We've carried them all over the world. We have taken them to places that they might not have gotten to on their own. And I know that some seeds travel on the wind, and some seeds like coconuts, they travel over the water. But a lot of the vegetable seeds that we're going to be talking about saving, our most common food plants, fruits and vegetables, are things that were important to people. And so people brought the seeds with them. And that puts us into a relationship, if you will, with seeds and these plants, because
my AirPods are dead.
the seeds that we save are a result of our preferences. I individually go out in the garden and I look at a tomato and I say, oh, I like the color of that tomato. And I taste, I say, oh, I like the way that one tastes. And Mike might come into my garden with me and pick a totally different tomato based on what he likes. And that relationship I'm talking about has to do with us choosing what we prefer as individuals. And that builds a relationship where the plants start to resemble us and our preferences. And we are the ones eating those plants, and so they nourish us. So you can see there's a reciprocal relationship between people and seeds that is very, very ancient. And we tap into that. We tap into that relationship when we decide to try out our seed saving garden. When we decide for the first time, well, I guess I'm tired of buying seeds, or I'm worried that the seeds I want won't be available to buy, or I'm just so curious about the science of it, or I'd like to show my kids or my grandkids about where food comes from. Any of those reasons are really good reasons to get into seed saving. And something that you also got to remember is people have been doing this for a very long time. We've been doing it and sharing that knowledge with each other long before the written word existed. So if we have to think about, well, can I do this? Is this even possible? Am I capable of it? The answer is absolutely. We are all capable of saving some seeds, and they might not turn out how we expect, but that kind of shouldn't stop us. I'm okay with some surprises in my seed saving. So that's just kind of some background on how I think about seed saving. Now, other people might think about it or have come to it for very different reasons. And, we want to make sure to capture your questions. But before we get into the nitty gritty, does anybody have any reasons that they save seeds that they want to share, or why you're curious about it, or why you're here tonight and what you want to learn?
I'm happy because I got seeds from the seed library, and I was overjoyed with getting the yellow flat beans that tasted like pure sugar. Nobody that I gave this bean to didn't first reply sugar. Now this came in a package from the library that said mixed beans. So I have no idea if I'm going to get the same bean next year because they grew right next door to other beans. But by far, it's the most miraculous thing I've tasted in 82 years.
Wow, that's so good to hear. And that's so also thank you for mentioning the seed library, because seed libraries are a way to get access to seeds that you might not be able to get otherwise. They might be seeds that people in your area have saved. They might be, as Miss Marcy pointed out, labeled in ways that make it hard for you to track them down in other ways. But at the same time, you're, starting a relationship with your seed library as well, if you will. And if you're able to save some seeds yourself and give some to your friends and some back to the seed library and keep what you need for next year, that's like a best case scenario. But if you're just getting started and you're like, I'm not even sure if my seeds are like good enough to go to the seed library, that's okay too. It's like every year I learn something different about the seeds, and I don't ever want to make people feel rushed or obligated to, contribute to the seed library. But when you do feel ready, it's a very, very gratifying feeling to take out seeds and to give seeds back. Anybody else got any questions or things that they hope to learn or reasons that they want to save seeds?
Abby, I'm curious about of the new people I see, how many of you have begun any seed saving activities? If you could raise your hand. So we got, okay, so we have a few people. Good. So this is, I guess the one thing based on what Abby has said so far is seed saving is difficult. Well, it's as complicated as you want to make it, it's as involved as you want to make it. And honestly, the worst thing that can happen is that the seeds may not come up in the spring. Nothing's gonna die, nobody's gonna get hurt, but maybe something went wrong. But honestly, I've never had no seeds that I've saved not sprout at some point in the spring. So the other thing is that nature is so generous and provides hundreds or thousands of seeds per plant. So you always have plenty of seeds once you've started saving them, and for yourself, for others, to share, to swap. If you go to a seed swap, you'll have seeds to swap. So really there's so little downside in seed saving. And I guess when I recognized that several years ago, it was just really an amazing epiphany that this is so easily available to us in a culture where we think we've got to go and buy these seeds. We have to order them. And really, I haven't purchased seeds in about 8 years because we're always receiving seeds. Miss Marcy from Lance up here in the UP has provided seeds to us. She's been very generous. So you can get seeds from anywhere around Michigan that people share. So it's really a fascinating economy that localizes the whole process of growing your own food. I think that's a big part of what makes seed libraries so important to a community, is to be able to provide for your own food grown locally and not have to rely on food being shipped in.
Well, how can we determine what seeds we can save and not? You know, you have a whole garden, I have a whole garden there. Doesn't mean that all those seeds, all those tomatoes, whatnot can be, you know, you can't just get any seed that you want. That's what I want to determine is what ones that I can save. How do you determine that? How do you determine what seeds are good to save and what not? Do you have to just get all heirloom? Or is there some species of tomatoes that you can just, you know, go ahead and reproduce, save, buy out, do whatever process? That's what I need to know.
Excellent. I love it. That is such a good question. So I'm going to give you the short answer now, and we're going to get into the long answer later. The short answer is that there's a couple different ways to look at your question. This is the short answer. Like Mike said, you can make it as complicated as you want. So if you have varieties in your garden that you know are hybrid, corn, tomatoes, beans, spinach, the way to tell if they're hybrid or not is to know what kind they are, right? So you got to know your variety, and you can look that up online. A big tip off is if your seed package says F1. So if on your seed package, say you planted spinach and it says space, that's the name of the spinach, F1. Well, that means it's an F1 hybrid. And all that happens when you save seeds from hybrids is that you get one of the parents and you're not sure which one you're going to get. So, right, a hybrid is two different parents put together to make that plant. And when you save seeds from that plant, you tend to get one of those parents. It's like the seed throws back in its memory this or this, and you don't know which one. So Sun Gold tomato is a really good example of an F1 hybrid. Sun Golds are great. They're delicious. They're a very popular cherry tomato. And everyone will tell you you can't save seeds from them because they're an F1 hybrid. Well, I met a gardener in the Upper Peninsula who said, yeah, you can. You get one of the parents and you're not sure which one, but one of the parents is super tasty. And that's what happens with hybrids, right? A very tasty, a very desirable quality is bred with something hardy, and the hardy thing is not as tasty. So in saving seeds from hybrids, you can take that chance, but you might get tasty or you might get sturdy and hardy.
Okay.
If you want to save seeds that you know are going to come back true to type, the key word is actually open pollinated. Heirloom has become kind of it's a label, but it's not a strictly defined label. So someone might say, oh, it's an heirloom tomato, meaning it has a history, it has a pedigree. It came from, you know, the Nebraska wedding tomato. It's got this big long history and it was gifted from, you know, mother to mother-in-law or whatever. But heirloom is not as useful of a word in terms of marketing for telling if you can seed save as open pollinated. So that's one thing. And your seed packet's the best place to go for that. But if you don't have that anymore, but you still know the variety, you can look it up online.
Okay.
So sorry, that was the short answer. You asked one of the toughest questions first, which I really like. And there's more angles that we could take, such as which seeds are patented, which seeds are utility patented, which seeds are, you know, owned in different ways. And that's something that seed libraries, you know, we all need to think about, but we're kind of in a transitional stage of understanding that and communicating that to our seed library patrons. So just putting it out there, some seeds are owned without being genetically modified. And just as an example of that, you know, does anyone know there's the David Austin rose? Okay, David Austin roses are a big deal. They're expensive. They're this brand name. And if I were to go out and breed a David Austin rose and then sell it, I could get in big trouble. But most of our garden vegetables are not David Austin roses. They do reproduce by seed, which the roses kind of don't, by the way. But anyway, the point is, you know, there's some plants that are brand named that are protected by copyright. But we in seed libraries really focus on those open pollinated, open source seeds that are meant to be shared.
Yeah. If you're not selling them, then there shouldn't be any problem. You're still
Right.
just passing them out.
you're not selling, so they can't get you.
Right? And that is part of the key human relationship with seeds, right? That's why seeds are a right, okay? Because seeds are part of our relationship with food. And if we have access to them and we are able to use them on our own farms, what is the problem? But of course, there's, different types of patents and all these other ways of thinking about it. But as you said, it's pretty difficult to track. I am being recorded, right? You're going to make sure that Michigan State University hears about this one, right? Okay.
You're never gonna hold me to what you're saying.
Anybody else got questions out the door, things that you came tonight to figure this out? You better ask me now. So once we get into it, we could go anywhere.
How about like squash or beans or peas and, all that? Is that more difficult to find a strain that you can keep on reproducing?
No, it's easy to find seeds for all of those. But when it comes to squash, we got to think about not is the seed available and open pollinated, it's how are the plants going to reproduce. And squash really like to cross pollinate. Have you ever had something come up in your compost that looks a lot like a pumpkin, but it's green and it never turns orange? That's a squashkin, a zucchino. I don't know what to call it. It's zucchini and pumpkins are in the same family, so they'll cross pollinate. So if you want to get squash that come back true to type year after year, you have to learn a little bit more about them and either just grow one kind so that they can't cross with any others, or separate the flowers from the pollinators, as in keep the bees out of the flower with some kind of exclusion. So a bag or something. Then you mark that flower, which you pollinate yourself. You be the bee. Then you mark it. You make it so the bees can't get at it. And then that's the fruit that you save from that plant.
Yeah. Okay.
Man, Christina, you got some really advanced questions going on here from the seed saving audience. Which seeds can I save and what about squash are the two kind of most difficult. There are good charts and resources on the internet that show you, okay, this is in the pumpkin family and it will cross like pumpkins and zucchini, that's Peppo. Or this is like butternut squash is in a totally different family and it doesn't cross with pumpkins. So you could grow pumpkins and butternut squash at the same time, and never would they meet. Beans, on the other hand, are self-pollinated. The shape of their flower tells us this. It's like a little chamber, and by the time the flower opens, it's already pollinated. So those don't cross-pollinate, and beans and peas are an excellent place to start with seed saving because they're basically foolproof. Miss Marcy was worried earlier, like, oh, I grew these beans next to these other beans. Even in the seed saving world of like Seed Savers Exchange, where they're growing many, many kinds of seeds, they only separate their beans by 15 feet, which tells you that at a place like Seed Savers Exchange, where they're very interested in preserving the quality and the purity of that seed, they don't separate it very far. So I would say, Miss Marcy, any other little genetic material from other beans, any other pollen that might have got in there will probably just make your yellow beans more, give them some vigor.
Okay.
So that's squash and beans and peas and tomatoes. We talked about a little bit. Mike's going to show us some tomatoes. While we're talking species stuff, I guess maybe we should get down into it. If you got any other questions, and you are like, oh, this is a burning question, throw it in the chat. And otherwise, if I can do my demo and Mike can do his thing, then we can get back to some more Q&A. What do I need to save seeds? Well, this is a grocery bag. This is, to me, the best container for harvesting seeds into. I go out into the garden with my bag and my scissors and a Sharpie, and I trim all the heads off the dill, or I put a bunch of beans in here, whatever. I just leave the top of the bag open and I stick it on the back porch when I'm done and I leave it there. I just that's one of the ways that I first dry the seeds when they come out of the field. I don't want to do this on a rainy day. You want to try and catch them after a day or two of sun so that they're dry. The more you let it rain on your seeds, the lower their germination rate. Okay, so doing it when they're ready, but not waiting too long, you know, like finding that timing and that weather window that's going to give you seeds that are drier and more likely to make it through the process of drying fully without molding. So I got my Sharpie, my scissors, my beans, or my bag, and that goes on the back porch for a while. That's how I would do anything dry. Okay, so things that I'm going to do dry include lettuce, carrots, dill, cilantro, beans, peas. They're things that the seed husk is going to come off pretty easily. And if you're saying, well, how do I know when I can like bring them in out of the field? Well, when the beans start to get looking less like good tasty beans and more like this one's pretty far gone, really. I could have probably harvested this sooner, but one good way to tell that your plant is ready to save seeds from is, you know, this is the part that would be connected to the plant, right? There would be a little green stalk. Let's see if I can get that in focus for you. When that turns brown, that means that the plant has stopped giving energy into making those seeds mature. So if you're wondering, is this ready? Look at the stem right below where the seed case or whatever is, and that'll give you some clue. When it comes to, okay, so now my beans have been in a bag on my back porch for a while, and I go to check on them and be like, are they dry enough to like store? What I'm gonna do actually is use my teeth, right? You want a seed that shatters under your tooth and does not tear. That tells me that the moisture content in the seed is low enough that I can put it into storage. So this works with any size and any kind of seed. Like think about a pumpkin seed, right? Like a roasted, well, no, let's do this two different ways. So let's say you make pumpkin seeds out of your Halloween pumpkin. You pull them out of the oven and you kind of, they're crispy, but they've still got some give, right? Versus a dried sunflower seed in the shell that you might get, you know, from the store. They have all kinds of flavors now, by the way. There's like ranch sunflower seeds. Anyway, those really crack, right? And it's less about actually how the seed coat behaves and more about how the seed itself behaves. So I'm not going to break my tooth on this bean, but I'll just show you. I was able to bite it, but it shattered. It did not tear at all. I didn't think you were going to see that tonight, did you? So beans. Mike, I know you got some beans, and I know I was going to go and then you were going to go, but I'm going off script.
That's all right.
Show me some beans. What do you got? And what are your tips and tricks?
Well, I'm very happy to have received these beans from Miss Marcy, one of our participants. And these are the wonderful sugar beans that she talked about earlier. And can you hear them, the noise they're making? Yeah, they are very dry. And so when these came in the mail, I simply laid them out flat, and I think they were, well, they were very bright yellow and still alive, still very, I would say, still growing. And so that was probably a month ago. And I've just laid them out in our house and let them dry out on their own. And now they're probably ready to be opened up. The seeds are probably dry, but I really like Abby's suggestion of shatter, not tear. So it's so easy to just pick up a seed and bite down on it. And if it shatters, it's dry enough to start storing. And if not, just let it go some more. I also have, these are some other beans that my seed saving was this year was not a big focus for me. So I did it while I was doing a lot of other things. And that's kind of the nice thing about seed saving, is that it doesn't take a lot of careful attention to it. You just get them at the right time. You pick your vegetables seeds at the right time from the plant, when they're dried at the end of the season, and then just let them dry out in a bag, as Abby was saying. I have another one to show you. You want me to keep going? Okay. So Abby, we showed you a grocery sack, and that's often what I use too. And it's so convenient. You can put the vegetable in there and just let it go for a long time before you have to do anything with it. So if you don't have a grocery bag, my wife did this with lettuce seed. Let's see if we can see that. So any bag will do. And this lettuce plant is just drying out, and it's just been sitting around on our porch. And I'm not going to mess with this. I probably won't mess with this for a couple months when I haven't got anything else to do besides shovel snow. And all the seeds will just drop down to the bottom of the bag. Most of it will just drop down to the bottom of the bag. So they're very easy to collect the seeds from what you've put in your bag. And that's often what we do.
Mike, I've got some lettuce too. Can I tag team on that?
In what way? You want to talk now?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
I want to say that, here's the bag with the lettuce seed in it. Like Mike says, it all falls to the bottom. But lettuce brings up a really interesting point about seed saving in general, which is, we were talking about at the very beginning, we need to wait. We need our plants to get to full maturity before we can seed save. So lettuce, baby lettuce takes 28 days, and a head of lettuce takes maybe 40. Well, how long does it take to get lettuce seeds though? And luckily we can do it within our growing season. It's not forever, but it's quite a bit longer than it takes to get the vegetable as you're going to eat it. Zucchini and cucumbers are the same way. When we eat them, their seeds are not developed or mature. They're like little babies. In order to have a cucumber or a zucchini that's ready to save seeds from, it's the size of a baseball bat and it's yellow. I mean, it depends on the variety, but it's not something you want to eat. So when you think about how much time do I have for this plant, how much time, it's not how many days until it's mature enough to eat. It's how many days does it take to finish its life cycle to give you seeds. Now, there are a couple exceptions to this rule, and luckily one of them is tomatoes. If a tomato is dead ripe, still edible, its seeds are probably viable. And you can tell seed maturity inside a tomato by when you cut it open, the seeds are going to be different colors. And I know we're going to talk about tomatoes more later, so let me riff on lettuce a little bit longer. So lettuce actually looks like little dandelions. Okay, so these are like yellow flowers, and they have this fluff, and they're wind blown. That's how lettuce reproduces naturally. So we've walked you through harvesting, okay, preliminary storage. So I go out in the garden, I pick it, I put it in the bag, and then I store it on my porch. Sounds like we both put them on our porches, Mike. Next comes the drying phase, right? So we've dried our seeds, and then we've tooth tested them, given them the shatter test. Now it's time to process them and store them. And when you look at this, remember how, Mike, you just said something good, which was, I'm not going to mess with these right now because it's cleaning lettuce seed. It's a little bit of an undertaking, but I have some tools that I like to use to make it a little bit easier, because we need to separate the seed, not only from, the flower casing that came in, but from this fluff. So in order to do that, I would just put this whole thing in a sieve, move it around a little bit, and sure enough, now I've got seeds. And a trick for seeds that have a lot of fluff is put them in a shallow bowl. And it was Ray Bush, who is a seed saver in our area, who taught me this. You put them in a little bowl, and then you can winnow the seed with your breath. Okay, so think about that for a second, right? Winnowing is separating the seed from the chaff, the part you want from the part you don't want. And I can blow across the kind of top of the bowl. And now a lot of stuff just flew out. No seeds flew
You
out.
can see it.
I've just got seeds in here. So that takes a little bit of doing, but it's fun. And it's fun to do outside if you want to do it outside, but I do it inside. I've gotten acceptably good at it. So now we have seeds that have been harvested, stored, dried, cleaned. Now it's time to, like, if you even make it this far. By the way, I've planted lots of lettuce just from last year's lettuce like this, and I just break it up in the field. But the problem with this is that this is good from year to year, but it doesn't help us out with long-term storage. So if you're thinking about wanting to keep seeds over multiple years, if you're thinking about wanting to give something back to the seed library, if you're thinking about storing seeds because you're concerned about having access to seeds 4, 5, 6 years in the future, you're going to want to clean them, because all of this stuff around the seed could harbor like little pieces of mold or bacteria that would eventually kind of attack the seed, if you will. And, you know, seeds are designed to store and carry information. They have a nice tough seed coat, but their viability is decreased, meaning their germination rates are decreased if you store them dirty. And notice that we're still all just talking about dry seeds here, but once I'm ready to store my seeds or take them back to the seed library, I can get a little envelope. I can get a plastic bag, like a little like tiny plastic bag. They make coin envelopes, you know, of different sizes. These are on the spendier side. The plastic bags are the cheapest, or you can save containers like I did here. I'm just saved, you know, I don't know what was in here, hummus, yogurt, whatever. And the other thing you can save is the desiccant packets that come in your shoes, that come in all kinds of things that we buy these days. These desiccant packets are great to toss into a container with the seeds to help suck any remaining moisture out. Now, people always ask me, well, okay, where am I going to need to store these? Like, do they go in the freezer? Do they go in the fridge? Do I need a root cellar? Do I need a safe? You want to put them out of direct sunlight in an area that is relatively temperature stable. So as long as it's not 90 degrees, you know, something room temperature below, and it stays relatively stable, because temperature swings and humidity swings are what decrease the viability of your seeds. If they experience too many swings, it's like they wake up a little bit every time it gets warm and damp, and then they go back to sleep a little bit when it cools off and gets dry. So they can only wake up and go back to sleep, if you will, so many times before they just don't germinate for you in the spring. They kind of used up all their energy on hoping. So where do you store them? Think of an area in your house that is relatively temperature stable and relatively stable in terms of humidity, tending toward the drier side. Some seeds can handle freezing, others can't. I can't keep that list straight, so I don't put mine in the freezer.
No, I haven't either.
No. Let's see. Showed you some tools. You know, back to the seed cleaning for just a second. I showed you this sieve. It's like screen, very fine. This one has holes. You can get all different sizes of holes. It's kind of fun to look for them at thrift stores. Different holes are good for different seeds. I like to use these really inexpensive baking dishes. So like clean different things. I don't know. They just, like, I had them around. And paper plates are another thing that you can clean on or dry seeds on and just write what's going on. So I think I'm about to transition away from dry seeds to talk more in depth about wet seeds. And that's kind of its own thing. Mike, you were going to talk about tomatoes. Do you have some there?
I do. And first of all, as far as little tools go, this is an interesting screen that I found these probably at the thrift store. And I thought, wow, these would be good for drying out seeds. And so I've used these quite often with my tomato seeds. So there are the tomato seeds, and when I put them on, after I had washed them very thoroughly, I just let them, I spread them out on the screen, and I had a second screen which I put on top just to keep them from blowing off the sieve itself. So I just let it sit for a long time, and oh, sorry, there's too many things going on here. And they're now dry. I haven't done the tear or what is it called? Shatter tear test. I haven't done that tonight. I could do it tonight and let you know, but they're drying on their own. This is the way I do it.
So when it comes to tomatoes, there's some interesting approaches. Some of them are stinky. And so you say, what is she talking about? So tomatoes and cucumbers both have a special coating on their seeds. It's like a sack, a gel sack that surrounds the seed. So you think about cutting up tomatoes on a cutting board. You go to wash that cutting board and you really got to scrub to get those seeds off. That's because that gel sack has adhered to the cutting board, and it's there to protect the tomato seed. It's like a little extra, layer of cushion, protection, nutrition. And interestingly, it inhibits germination. What? So if you think about being a tomato plant out in the wild and you drop your seeds, well, you've just dropped them into a moist ground. They're going to begin to rot. What do seeds really like? They like moisture and humidity. But maybe you don't want the seeds to come up quite yet for seasons or whatever. Maybe it's fall and your seeds need to wait until spring to come up. So it's not until that coating degrades or rots off or ferments off in the wild that those seeds will sprout. Now, some people say, it doesn't make any difference. I don't do this whole fermentation thing. I just save my tomato seeds and they come up just fine. And, I think that can be true. If the idea of fermenting tomato seeds keeps you from saving tomato seeds, then don't ferment them. But if you don't mind it, I get better germination by about 50% actually. And the process is you take your tomatoes and you squeeze them into a jar. Okay, pulp and everything, just squeeze your ripe tomatoes into a jar. Don't cover it hard, as in like if it's a mason jar, don't screw the lid on, because you're trying to get a special kind of fermentation action going. And a special white mold will form on the top of the tomato pulp that's in that jar. It attracts fruit flies like crazy. And at the time that white mold forms, this is a special kind of mold, a yeast that lives in harmony with tomatoes in order to do this exact job, in order to take this seed coating and decompose it. So they have kind of a symbiotic relationship, and all tomatoes have this. It just kind of comes with them. It's part of the package. It's white mold. So I think, Mike, did you just go get one to show?
I'm going to show you what I do with my tomato seeds. As Abby said, you squish it all into a jar, or I use a jar, a mason jar. And then when the tomato is in there all squished up, I sometimes put some water in there. You don't have to, right? It's not, no water. Okay, so yeah, it always works. Then I take a coffee filter and I put that on top and then screw the lid in. Now that allows air to go through, but it keeps the flies out and the fruit flies. So that's what I've been doing for a while. And then eventually you have that minute or two of when you dump the whole contents of your jar into a sieve. I wouldn't use a flat one necessarily, but one that will catch everything. And once that, sometimes you get lucky in that the mold around the top, it's all one little wafer of gel, and that'll just kind of slide off down the drain, it's gone, and then the smell is gone. But then you continue to wash and rinse and rinse. And so the odor is brief, and it's really worth the discomfort of the smell in the long run.
So after you wash them, you lay them out again to dry, and then you do the tooth test for tear or shatter before you store them.
I'm gonna do it right now.
Okay.
No shatter, so
Soft,
soft, yeah,
not
it's gonna
ready.
be a while.
Okay. All right. There's one more species that I want to talk about, two more depending on whether or not people have questions. We were talking about squash earlier, and I was trying to set up like a camera to show you guys squash, but it didn't work out. So you're just going to have to listen to me talk about this. This is a pie pumpkin. And in order to save seeds from this, I'm actually going to wait until I eat it, because the longer the seeds stay in the squash, the more viable they are. It's like squash is the perfect container for its own seeds. You find this over and over in seed saving. The plants have their own mechanisms, very elegant, very beautiful mechanisms for keeping themselves. So I don't need to say, oh, I want pumpkins next year. I've got to do all my pumpkins at once. And, I don't know, process all that pumpkin pulp and put it in the freezer. No, you just store your squash as you would normally store it. And at the time that you break it open to eat it, that's when you can save seeds from it. Unless you're a seed saving company, right? And you need like pounds of seeds at once. But for us at the home scale, the longer I leave the seeds in the squash, while the squash is still in good condition, no mold, no little soft spots, the longer I leave them in the squash, the more viable they are, the more viable they become. I really recommend a serrated knife for getting into your squash. This is a nice big bread knife. I think that even a sharp, like chef's knife like this is kind of dangerous. And I'm not going to do it on camera. You guys all know what the inside of a pumpkin looks like. But the point is, I'm going to treat this very differently than I would treat my lettuce, than I would treat my beans, than I would treat the dry things, right? So you've had a couple examples of dry seeds. And now you've had a couple examples of wet seeds. So in the wet seeds category would be, like I said, cucumbers, zucchini, pumpkins, and tomatoes with their special process of fermenting, melons, things that have like a lot of flesh. I've showed you all of my toys, so I'm going to show you my books now. Two books that I really enjoy. One is called Landrace Gardening. It's by Joseph Lofthouse. He's an interesting person to follow on social media if you're looking for someone to follow. This book is about his approach to seed saving, which is to let things cross-pollinate in order to basically breed varieties of plants that are well suited to your environment, your specific climate. And speaking of breeding, I think people get nervous when I say, now, if you're saving seeds, you're breeding plants, right? Because we think you have to have a lot of experience or a degree or something to breed plants, but you actually don't. All you have to do is spend some time with them. But this book is called Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties. It's by Carol Deppy. It's an excellent resource, and it answers a lot of the deeper questions that are attached to the questions that you guys asked me tonight. And it also kind of goes through how she does it in her garden. She talks about crossing plants, if you're curious about that. But both of those are good books. And I wouldn't say that either of them is like Seed Saving 101, right? There's also Seed Saving 101 kinds of books. One is called The Seed Saving Garden. That's put out by Seed Savers Exchange. And there's another one. Oh yeah, The Seed Garden. There it is. Mike, do you have the Suzanne Ashworth one?
Not at hand. We do have that, yes, but I didn't bring that out.
So yeah, so the Suzanne Ashworth, while you're saving seeds, while you're processing your seeds, while you're drying them, while you're waiting around on them, reading up about it can be interesting. I never have time to read my seed saving books in the spring. I put them, maybe TMI, but I put them in the bathroom, and I'll just pick a variety to look at and be like, oh, I'm curious about beans, or oh, I'm curious about corn, and I'll learn about it during the winter, and then kind of apply that knowledge, because the spring is always so busy. One other kind of seed saving we haven't talked about is flowers. Flowers are a wonderful addition to your seed library. These are marigolds. Okay, so they're not edible to humans, but they're great for pollinators, and they can be used as dye plants. And flowers are actually really very easy to save seeds from, most of them, because they're not trying to cross with each other quite the same way, or we don't care so much about the predictability of the results. So flowers are an option. And then here's garlic. And this is kind of a funny looking potato, but potatoes. These, when we plant these, we're not really saving their seeds per se, right? This potato, I'm going to wait until spring, and it's going to get eyes, and I'm going to cut it into pieces, and I'm going to plant this. I'm basically doing less of a seed saving and more of like bulbs, right? Like tulips or whatever. I'm putting the flesh of the plant, of its root, back in the ground for it to make more of the plant. It's more like cloning in a way, kind of. And garlic is kind of similar. These are not seeds, right? Garlic has a flower, and the flower produces seeds. And after you grow it for a few years, it can get this big. But when we plant garlic, and which we do in the fall, and here's kind of a fun tip for if you have hardneck garlic. Ooh, I don't know if you guys can see this. So I just hit the neck a couple times, and the whole thing just fell off of that neck. Right, so now I've got my individual cloves. You crack the cloves, so you expose a little bit of it, and then sometime before the ground freezes, and you can do it pretty close, but sometime before the ground freezes, preferably before the end of October, you put this 2 inches into the ground, and maybe 4 or 5 inches between garlic plants, maybe more, depending on how big you want your garlic to be. Ooh, get some garlic smells. So those are some examples of plants where we're not saving the seeds, but you still might want to know how to get them next year for your garden. And that kind of wraps up what I had to say. Mike, what do you got?
I was enjoying listening to you.
Yeah, I know you have something to say.
Well, I'd like to know if people feel, if the audience feels a little more prepared, if this has been helpful. If you'd raise your hand just to let us know, how many people will feel like they can start saving seeds at some point? There's Miss Marcy, thank you. Are people ready to try doing this? Great, great. And you have us, those of you who are in Alpena have a seed library now. And how many people have withdrawn seeds from the seed library? Raise your hand. Yes, good. Good. And it's really gratifying when you can take seeds that have been given to you for free and then grow the plants and collect the seeds and return them to the seed library. And we like to talk about how if each person could do that, we would really have as much seed as we needed, because the plants provide so many seeds. And if we all save seeds and return them to our community seed libraries, we really take care of our food situation very handily and in a localized way. So we encourage everyone to try to do that, try to save your seeds, and you can go as deep as you want into seed saving, and yet it's very difficult to mess it up totally. Seeds are very forgiving, and so I noticed talking to people on the West Coast who are pretty serious seed savers and seed library folks, and they really get into everything's got to be very exact, very pure, and they have to use the Latin names. And I'm not that kind of a person, and maybe you aren't either. I just want to have food to eat each year, and food that I've planted and grown on my property. And so we don't put that much emphasis on getting all the details correct. We just like to see people try it and discover for themselves that it's pretty easy. It goes on whether you are involved or not. So, you can't really go wrong with it. And so I hope this was helpful for you. And I appreciate that Christina has invited us to do this. I think I learned more than when I came in here. So I took a lot of notes because there's so much there that Abbey does and shares, and I appreciate her skill and knowledge. And I hope you got as much out of it as I did. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I do want to mention something about, this is Tina.
Tina, we keep calling you Christina, but I remembered you go by Tina.
Well, my given name's Christina, but I go by Tina.
Tina,
Here.
Tina from Alpena. That's how we first met you and remembered you.
So I am new at this, but what I created and tried to help promote the Alpena Seed Library to create sustainability within the community. But I am new. I do have a question, but I also made the mistake of storing wet seeds I thought were dry and ended up with a container of mold. Yeah, so I was like, oh no. But my question for the beans, do you have to keep them in the husk for drying, or can you remove them like I did, because I got really excited to see the seeds inside before they dried and then just laid them out?
You could go either way. So if I had to collect my beans on a wet day because I just couldn't get a dry day in the fall, if I try to leave them in the husks in order to dry, they just might mold. So I might shuck them at that point if I had time. And I might also just, I don't know, like try if I didn't have time and be like, oh, I'll put a fan on them. But I don't think that there's a rule about whether or not to shuck them. If they are not totally ready, they might finish a little bit if you leave them in the shell. But I think with beans, they're kind of done maturing once you take them off the vine and they don't mature anymore, as opposed to a melon, right? Which you can pick a little green and it'll get riper on the counter. You know what I mean? There's like vegetables that are kind of done when you pick them and others that mature more after they're picked.
This is Joe. I always husk my legumes, even my peas and everything, as soon as I pick them, and just leave the seed laid in, like I said, in a paper bag all year round. That way I know they're dry in the springtime. I've never, like you guys are holding up the pods and everything. I get rid of that into the compost pile as soon as I can. And just keep the seeds. And I've harvested seeds in the green pod that look, they were huge. They bubble out, make the pod, and those still dried out great next year. Just a matter of knowing when, they're already a mature seed, even though they're in the green husk. And I'll take those and dry them and replant them.
And this is what oh, go ahead.
I too did the same thing. I didn't know that it should have been saved in the pod when I had these sugar flat yellow beans. I had so many people that came to the house and tasted this that they requested that they get some seeds. So I went and picked them and I shucked them And then I found out that I wasn't supposed to, so I luckily have some pods that still are not shucked, just like Mike, when I sent it to Mike. So these particular flat beans were like upward of 14 inches long, and they grew to my rooftop. I had to get on a ladder to pick them. Unbelievable beans. And so I'm looking forward to being able to grow them next year. But because I learned germination from the seed savers, before I am certain that these beans that I've saved are actually going to grow, I am going to do the germination test to see if in fact the ones that I shucked are going to do the same as the ones that were left in the husks. And by the way, Mike, you're supposed to be using that screen to make squeaky cheese.
Is that what that's for?
Yes, it is, Mike.
You are the chef. I am just
I
I use whatever I have, whatever I find.
I had squeaky cheese this morning, so I certainly know.
Okay. All
No,
right. When I saw this, I thought seed saving. That's what I thought when I saw
No,
this.
that's curds and whey.
It was cheap. It was like 10 cents. So
Oh, wow. Send them
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I'd like to shout out to Janet Olson, who I think is in the room right now. Is that you, Janet?
It is. It is.
Oh, Janet's the person who helped me get my very first puppy ever. And she's been a very dear friend of my family for, gosh, since I was 10 years old. And I am just so happy that you are here tonight. Thank you so much, Janet.
Hi, hon. How are you? I
I'm
miss
good.
you.
I miss you too. I'm closer to home. I get to see my mom a little bit more, which she's happy about. Maybe I'll get to see you sometime soon.
Yeah, hopefully next time I see your mom, I won't be coming home from surgery and have to crash there.
Yeah.
That was bad.
So one of the things I'd also like to mention is, being that you said puppy, I lost my dog to blastomycosis. And I want you to know that at one point I had a blastomycosis ulceration on my nose. So I went and got my blood sample. So if you guys end up with some kind of ulceration and you've been digging in the dirt, because that's what blastomycosis comes from. It comes from a fungus, and it seems to be spreading in the UP pretty predominantly. So not only should you watch your dog if it starts to cough and stops eating, and get it to a vet as soon as possible, and insist on a blood test to make certain it doesn't have blasto, because 2 vets didn't do it. Also watch yourself. So somebody thought it was just a pimple, but it actually looked like small little mushrooms growing on my nose. So watch yourself. I know that if you do a study on blastomycosis, you will see what the samples are and what it looks like. And you need an antifungal medicine to stop it. So being that we're scratching in that dirt, and being that Big Bay and Marquette and now the Huron Bay has this, be aware of it.
Thanks, Marcy. We do have a question here.
I had never thought about this before. I grew melon for the first time this year, and it was delicious, but I grew it with pumpkins and squash. So can I save the seeds, or am I going to have some kind of a mutant?
That's a really good question. And it comes down a little bit to what kind of melon did you grow?
So that's the funny thing. A friend who was in Florida said, "Oh, this melon is so great. I'm going to save the seeds and let Mary grow it." We don't know.
Okay.
Watermelon, muskmelon?
It's a muskmelon type.
Cantaloupe.
Okay.
Like a cantaloupe. She called it an orange melon, but I got a lime green melon. It's still tasty.
Okay. So I'm looking up the species of cantaloupe right now. That's funny. Basically, the question is it the same species as, let's say, you said you group pumpkins and squash too?
Yes.
What kind of squash
Um,
or what type?
buttercup.
Buttercup, okay. So your melon was Cucumis mellow, M-E-L-O. That's not Curcumis pepo, which is pumpkins. So far we're good. And you just said it was honey nut? No, what was it?
Buttercup.
Buttercup?
Yeah, buttercup squash.
I think that's a maxima. So, okay, you're a great case because you could save from all 3 of your cucurbit plants and none of them should have crossed because they're all different species.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, now that isn't to say that other things don't happen, but I would say you have enough evidence to give it a try, watch what happens next year, and you should have 3 different plants. Now, that's not to say your neighbor maybe didn't have, right? Because bees travel up to 2 miles. Sometimes people have even heard up to 6 miles, but you know, what your neighbors are growing might affect what you're growing depending on how close your neighbors are.
Okay.
Good questions.
My neighbors are quite a ways away, but within 2 miles.
Well, and the other question is, you know, would bees be able to get between you? Is there a lot of forest? Is there, you know, what kind of barriers are there? So
Okay.
there's a lot of factors. I'd say you're probably good to try saving from whatever you want. And now the other thing is they might be a hybrid, and remember, you might get one of the parents, because unless you can tell exactly which variety, it can be a little hard to tell what you're working with.
It will be fun.
Good. You know, and you got a squash or a melon that you liked this year. It's really fun to see just what happens next year, and you might get something even better. You don't know.
Yeah. Cool.
So give us a full report. Bring one in next fall.
That's right. Bring in a few.
Are there any other questions for Abby and Mike?
Well, okay, so Abby, you had those books and I tried writing down the titles and the authors' names, but I don't think
Yeah,
I
I'll send that to you in email.
Yeah, okay. That way I can also see if we have them and perhaps purchase them for our library.
Okay, thank you.
I want to congratulate the Alpena Seed Library on your first year. I think, or is it your second year?
Second year, but first year actually getting into the groove because last year we were kind of renovating.
Right. So it's your second year, and I'm really curious where you're going to be a year from now, right? You've done such a great job of building community
Ooh,
around
look
it
at that.
and having seeds. Wow, cool.
See?
Drop those off.
Awesome.
Yeah,
From one seed library to another. Good work.
yeah. Well done.
There was a question, was the one book, the Seed Saver's Garden?
The Seed Garden, which is from the Seed Savers Exchange. And if you become a member of Seed Savers Exchange, they will send you this book and several seed saving tools, like the little bags that Abby showed you for keeping the bees out of your plants so they don't pollinate. Our seed library is a member of Seed Savers Exchange. It's a yearly fee. I think it's $25 or so, But one of the things they did is they sent us this book. And I've used this primarily when I've had questions. And maybe you have it at your library, Tina. Maybe you already have this in the library. So, and I was wondering if you have a list of books, seed saving books already in Alpena that is available to people, are available.
We do, we just had a donation that specifically said they wanted nature and books about gardening. And so we have a few new ones in our library. Some of them are still coming because they're not published yet.
Oh,
Michelle they have a seed library in is it Pennsylvania? PA library. Very nice. No, there's no other questions. I do want to thank Mike and Abby for coming back. Maybe we can set things up next year. But I did learn a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot about seed saving, and stay tuned for other great things coming from the seed library.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, that's good.
Thank you.
Next year, Tina's garden is gonna be twice as big, so she's gonna have lots of seeds.
Yes.
Anybody wants any raspberry bushes, come to my house and get 'em.
These
I'm
are my
chopping 'em
seeds.
up.
Here's my seeds.
Very good.
The deer did get to them.
Yeah.
So
I think as long as we're still all here, I want to make a plug for our seed swap, which is how I met Tina last March. We will have is it 9th? Yeah, it'll be the 9th annual seed swap in Marquette on March 25th, Saturday, March 25th. And so maybe you guys could carpool and come and join us and see what it's like. It's really a great time. We've always so much enjoyed all the people getting together and all the different seeds from different parts of the UP and different people getting together, talking about their seed saving, kind of like you were doing this earlier this evening, talking about your experience and what we call seed stories. So keep that in mind for in March, at the end of March. And I'm sure Tina will be publicizing that. She gets our emails and we'll share that with everyone too.
yeah, we'll throw it on social media and post it in the library. So I got a whole bunch of wheat seeds.
I started with this seed saving as a result of notification from TV6. So even though I could not go get the seeds, I had a friend go get the seeds and started last year with getting free seeds from that publication from TV6. And, you know, I'm really enjoyed whether it was the seed saving or the germination, which I found phenomenal.
You mean the Germ Fest we had?
Yeah.
In the spring.
Yeah,
And
with all my, well, with plants, I mean, plates all over my bed.
yeah. Miss Marcy is a germinating wonder. She's queen of germination. She germinated something like 80 different seed varieties to something we do at the seed library to make sure that the seeds we're sharing with the community are viable. And so we had a big event where we invited volunteers to do a simple germination test, and we would give them, what was it, Abby, 10 or 15 seed varieties, and they would report their results. So something Tina can start thinking about. It's a fun activity.
That sounds like fun.
Well, if you've saved your seeds, you know, even if you just take a few of the seeds that you've saved and put it between paper towel and in a plastic bag, and after so many days, I figure it's way under a week when they start to sprout. If they don't sprout, then you know you might as well not plant those seeds.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Here's
Yes, it was
to,
wonderful.
here's to an early spring,
Here, here.
Here, here.
because we have an early winter.
Yeah.
It was already snowing in places like Whaling and stuff today.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I
they
don't,
posted on Facebook. I thought, I don't even have my blower ready yet. Don't do this.
I didn't rake yet.
Yeah, I'm still ready. It's no.
I can't even have a rake on my last.
Leaves are still on the trees. I can't rake yet. He's gonna blow back.
Boy, so different up here.
A friend of mine over in Ironwood sent a picture of 7 inches of snow on on top of her car this morning at 7 o'clock.
Wow.
And they got about another five today, I think. So Marquette was supposed to get hit pretty good too.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got snow yet. I'm east of Marquette right now, and I don't think we have snow yet, but it's early.
I heard it was starting to get nasty today, and yeah, it is going to be a chore because it's wet and heavy. And
Yeah.
you know, these first couple storms of the season, if they're like that and they don't go away, they don't give us a good base. You know, we want this to melt. Come at 8 inches of snow, but melt. So we can
Well, we got
get a better
60-degree weather coming this weekend. It should melt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
Don't
That's
let
good.
anybody be shoveling heavy wet snow if you got 60-degree weather in a couple of days.
yeah,
Yes.
we'll be all right.
I found the leaf.
Okay.
blower that helpful.
It does.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm signing off.
Me
Good night,
too.
Miss Marcy.
Thank you, everyone. Good night, Miss Marcy.
Bye.
Night, everyone.
Don't forget,
Yes.
Mike, get some squeaky cheese on that.
Please. All right, we'll talk about that later.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye.
Tina. Good night.
I didn't bring it.
Good evening.
So excited.